My father suspended me until I apologized to my sister, and when he said it, I simply replied, "All right." He thought I would fall apart. He thought I would panic, beg, defend myself, or break down like I always did in the past whenever he used his authority to shut me down. But something inside me had already changed before that moment even arrived. What he didn't understand was that his words weren't punishment anymore. They were permission. Permission to detach. Permission to walk away. Permission to finally let go of a weight I had carried since childhood. I didn't grow distant overnight. It happened slowly, quietly, invisibly, like erosion. A cliff doesn't collapse in a single moment. It weakens for years before it finally breaks. That's what happened to me. My sister, Alina, had always been the center of the house, delicate, dramatic, the kind of person who weaponized tears and turned them into currency. She knew exactly when to cry, who to cry in front of, how to twist her voice, how to shrink into fragility so people would rush to comfort her. It was a talent, a dark one, a manipulative one, but a talent nonetheless. And my father fell for it every time. My mother saw through it, but she stayed silent. Maybe because silence was easier than conflict. Maybe because she had seen favoritism in her own childhood and thought it was normal. Maybe because she hoped things would fix themselves. They never did. When I was 10 and she was 7. She stole my school project and ripped it because I had gotten more stars on my report card. When I confronted her, she cried so loudly that the neighbors heard. When my father came running, he didn't ask a single question. He just scolded me for making her upset. At 12, she broke my watch, my birthday gift. She said it slipped. She said she was sorry. She wasn't. At 14, she shattered my trophy. At 16, she lied to her teacher about me yelling at her. And my father grounded me without listening to a word. At 18, she crashed my bicycle and I got blamed. At every turn, every year, every moment, my voice was drowned out by her tears. My truth was erased by her performance. And the worst part wasn't that they believed her. The worst part was that they expected me to tolerate it for the sake of peace, family, and being older. But being older didn't mean being disposable. It didn't mean being a punching bag. It didn't mean having to apologize for things I didn't do. Still, I stayed. Still, I forgave. Still, I cleaned up every mess. Until the laptop incident. Until the night everything snapped. I had poured months into that project. It wasn't just a college assignment. It was my dream, my escape, my chance to build a life separate from the chaos at home. Professors praised it. My classmates admired it. I believed in it. And jealousy, her oldest friend, destroyed it in seconds. When I walked into the room and saw the smashed laptop, something inside me went silent. Not angry, not shook silent. Silence is dangerous. Silence is the point where emotion turns into decision. My father didn't even ask what happened. He didn't even look at the broken laptop long enough to understand the loss. He simply said, "You are older. You can fix it. Don't shout at her." That one line was the summary of my entire childhood. You don't matter. Your loss doesn't matter. Your effort doesn't matter. Your pain doesn't matter. Just don't upset her. I rebuilt everything overnight. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. My hands shook the whole time. My breath felt heavy, but I rebuilt it all. And somehow, against all odds, I still passed. I still got shortlisted. And that my small win became her biggest insecurity. She cried in front of my father, telling him I insulted her, threatened her, told her she was worthless. Lies. Pure lies. I hadn't spoken a single word to her since that night. But tears controlled the house. Not truth. Not logic. Tears. So my father stood in front of me, face cold, tone strict, arms crossed like a judge in a courtroom where the verdict was already decided, and said, "You are suspended from all family matters until you apologize to your sister." Suspended. From my own family. Like I was an employee violating company rules. Like my existence was conditional. Like my dignity could be paused. He expected resistance. He expected an argument. He expected me to try to prove my innocence. Instead, he got one word. "All right." and that terrified him more than any protest. Because silence is powerful. Indifference is powerful. Acceptance is dangerous. For the next 2 weeks, I disappeared inside the house. I did my own things. I prepared for interviews. I stayed out of everyone's way. If they wanted distance, I gave them distance more than they could handle. The house ran without me on, struggled. My father didn't know where things were kept. My sister didn't know how to do paperwork. My mother didn't know how to fix the Wi-Fi or printer or bank forms. They had been relying on me for years without realizing it. And when they suspended me, they also suspended everything I quietly held together. Then came the Colmy Scholarship approval. Fully funded abroad. A dream I barely allowed myself to hope for. The moment I got the email, my entire world shifted. Not in an explosive way. In a quiet, life-changing way. I walked to the living room holding the acceptance letter. My father looked at it, then looked at me, and the first thing he said was, "Did you apologize?" "No," I said, "and I'm not going to." A sister scoffed loudly. "He thinks he doesn't need us anymore." But that wasn't the truth. The truth was that they had never needed me, only used me. And I finally woke up to that fact. I've packed slowly, over days. I didn't hide it. I didn't announce it. I didn't seek permission. I wasn't leaving in anger. I was leaving in clarity. And clarity is irreversible. My father entered my room the night before my departure. He wasn't angry. He wasn't strict. He was confused. Lost? "You're really going?" he asked. "Yes, because of this fight?" He pressed. "No, because of everything before it." He looked at the floor. "You could just apologize and stay. We can go back to normal." "Normal wasn't fair," I said quietly. "Normal was killing me." He didn't reply. He couldn't. The morning I left, my sister avoided my eyes. My father stood stiffly, arms at his side, wanting to say something, but not knowing how. My mother cried softly as she kissed my forehead. At the door, my father finally said, "If you leave, things won't be the same." I nodded. "They're not supposed to be," and I walked away. I didn't look back. The taxi drove. The house shrank in the distance. But inside me, something grew: peace, freedom, identity for the first time in my life. I wasn't the background character in my sister's drama. I wasn't the family's emotional sponge. I wasn't the responsible one carrying everyone else's weight. I was mine, and all it took was one word. One simple, quiet, powerful word. All right. After I replied to my father with just one word, all right, I had no idea that a single word would shake the foundation of my entire family. I hadn't planned anything that day. Not revenge. Not distance. Just exhaustion. A heavy weight I had carried for years. And that one word finally snapped the chain holding it. But the story doesn't end there. The real storm. The real changes. The real truth. All begins from here, day by day. Something inside my house shifted. The phone stopped ringing. No one called me. Not my father. Not my sister. Not even my mother. For the first time in my life. They realized what it felt like when I didn't run back to fix everything. For days past. 4 days of silence. 4 days of them waiting for me to break first. But I didn't. And the silence bothered them more than it bothered me. At my workplace. My boss, who was also an old family friend, walked up to me. He asked, "Are you okay?" "Your dad called me. He said you need discipline." I froze for a moment. Then he said something. No one from my own family had ever had the courage to say your problem isn't discipline. Your problem is that your family uses you. It hit me hard. Not because it wasn't true, but because it was the truth I had never spoken out loud. He trusted me with a bigger project, a higher responsibility. For once, someone believed in me, not because they needed me, but because I deserved it. My family had suspended me. The world gave me an opportunity. A week later, my sister finally texted me. "You are disgusting. Dad is stressed because of you. You're ruining everything. Just apologize." Those 3 words she always expected me to say. I am sorry. I laughed off for the first time because now I understood I had spent my entire life apologizing for things. Never did. I didn't reply. She texted again. If you don't come back, remember, we won't consider you family anymore. Still, I didn't reply. And that night, for the first time in years, I slept peacefully because silence was no longer a punishment for me. It was freedom. And this was only the beginning of the new me after that weekend. I started noticing the subtle changes at home. My father seemed unsure, like he had finally realized that controlling me wasn't going to work. My sister's smug confidence was cracking ever so slightly, though she still tried to act untouchable. My mother remained silent, her eyes watching me with a mix of worry and understanding. I packed my bags slowly, deliberately, savoring every moment of my independence. The house felt smaller as I moved through it, each room a reminder of years of control, manipulation, and silent suffering. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't apologize. I simply prepared to leave as the taxi pulled away from my street. I glanced back only once. I saw my father standing stiffly at the door, my sister's arms crossed, my mother with her hand over her mouth, unsure what to say. I felt a strange calm, a liberation that was both terrifying and beautiful. I realized then that all those years of silent endurance, of accepting blame, of hiding my pain, all of it had led me to this moment. The world outside seemed wider, freer, full of possibilities I had never allowed myself to imagine. My first week abroad was surreal. I had never traveled alone, never made all the decisions myself. I felt the weight of responsibility in a different way, not as punishment, but as empowerment. I met new people, colleagues who appreciated my skills, mentors who challenged me, and friends who didn't manipulate or deceive. I realized how toxic my family dynamic had been and how much I had ignored for the sake of peace, but I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt clarity. I felt strength. I learned to say no without guilt, to set boundaries without fear, and to value myself without apology. While I thrived abroad, messages from home slowed to a trickle. My sister tried to provoke me online, sending passive-aggressive texts, but I didn't respond. My father occasionally called, but his voice carried hesitation, almost regret. My mother reached out a few times, cautiously, and I replied politely but firmly. I was no longer the same person they could control. I was free, independent, and unshakable. I began documenting my experiences, writing journals about my journey, reflecting on years of emotional manipulation, and planning my future. I realized that life was bigger than family politics, bigger than guilt and favoritism. It was about growth choices and self-respect. My scholarship opened doors I had only dreamed about. I traveled, learned new skills, and met people who believed in merit, not manipulation. And slowly, I stopped thinking about the house, about the fights, about the injustice. I focused on building my life, my identity, my peace. I had survived years of favoritism, of lies, of blame, of suspension. And the one word I said, all right, had been my turning point. It wasn't surrender, it wasn't weakness, it was liberation. And from that liberation, I discovered a life I never thought possible. A life filled with respect, opportunities, friendships, and growth. A life where my voice mattered, my decisions mattered, and my existence was not conditional. My father, my sister, my family, they remained a part of my past, a chapter I had closed. But their lessons shaped me in ways I would carry forever. And as I looked out of the airplane window months later, leaving the country for a new opportunity, I whispered to myself, all right, not to appease anyone, not to apologize, not to surrender, just to affirm my choice, my freedom, my life. By the second year abroad, I had fully established myself in every aspect of my life. I was independent, confident, and completely in control of my choices. My career flourished beyond what I had ever imagined. I was trusted with projects, responsibilities and opportunities that demanded my full skill and dedication. And I excelled in every one of them. My social life was fulfilling. I surrounded myself with people who genuinely cared about me, supported my growth, and respected my boundaries. I no longer needed validation from family members who had never given it freely. I realized that the love and respect I sought had always existed within me, waiting for the moment I would finally claim it. I reflected on the past often, not with bitterness, but with understanding and insight. I understood the patterns of manipulation my family had used, the ways I had been silenced, and the courage it took to finally speak and act for myself. I also recognized the subtle victories I had achieved along the way, moments of strength that no one had witnessed, but that shaped the person I had become. I began to travel extensively, immersing myself in new cultures, learning languages, and meeting people from all walks of life. These experiences broadened my perspective. It taught me that my past did not define me. My past was a foundation, a teacher, a stepping stone to the life I was now living. I took time to nurture my mental, emotional, and physical health. I meditated, exercised, and journaled regularly. I developed rituals that reinforced my independence and celebrated my accomplishments. My family occasionally tried to reach out, but their messages had less power over me than before. My father's attempts to control or guilt me were now met with calm firmness. My sister's attempts at jealousy or provocation failed to affect me. I responded to my mother when appropriate, but I maintained boundaries that ensured my peace and autonomy. I shared my journey publicly, writing blogs and essays that inspired others who had faced similar struggles. I spoke about resilience, boundaries, self-respect, and the importance of claiming one's life and voice. My story resonated with thousands of people around the world, many of whom thanked me for helping them find the courage to stand up for themselves. I realized that my experiences, though painful, had equipped me to help others. I had turned my struggles into strength. My word, all right, had not just marked a personal turning point, but the beginning of a life of empowerment and clarity. I continued to thrive academically. Professionally and socially, I celebrated achievements without guilt, made decisions without fear, and embraced happiness without apology. I traveled to new countries, learned new skills, and built lasting, meaningful relationships. I no longer carried the weight of manipulation, favoritism, or obligation. I was free to live fully, unapologetically, and intentionally. I reflected on my journey daily, knowing that every struggle, every tear, every moment of patience had led to this extraordinary life. I had survived, adapted, and grown stronger. I had claimed my voice, my freedom, and my future, and every day, as I whispered all right to myself, it was no longer a word of acquiescence, but of triumph, self-empowerment, and unwavering confidence. I was no longer a character in someone else's story. I was the author of my own, and it was unfolding exactly as it should. By the third year abroad, my life had fully transformed. I was no longer defined by the expectations, manipulations, or favoritism of my family. I had built a life that was entirely my own, based on my choices, my efforts, and my values. I continued to excel in my career, gaining recognition, respect, and opportunities that matched my talent and dedication. I cultivated friendships that were honest, supportive, and mutually empowering. I traveled extensively, explored new cultures, and immersed myself in experiences that expanded my perspective. I maintained my mental, emotional, and physical health, creating a life of balance and intentionality. I reflected on my past with gratitude, not resentment, understanding that each challenge, manipulation, and forced apology had shaped the resilient, self-aware person I had become. I wrote and shared my journey with others through blogs, essays, and personal talks, inspiring those who had experienced similar family dynamics to find their voice and claim their freedom. I had discovered that true independence was not just escaping toxic circumstances, but fully embracing oneself, setting boundaries, and living authentically. I still had contact with my mother, cautiously nurturing a relationship based on love rather than obligation. My father and sister occasionally attempted to reach out, but I engaged only on my terms, maintaining the boundaries that protected my peace. I realized that freedom was more than physical distance. It was emotional sovereignty, the ability to respond rather than react, to choose my path rather than be dragged along. I thrived academically, professionally, socially, and personally. I celebrated achievements without guilt, made decisions without fear, and embraced joy without apology. I had become the person I was always meant to be: strong, independent, self-respecting, and empowered. I often reflected on the moment I said all right to my father's demand for an apology. It was a single word, but it marked the beginning of my liberation. It was not surrender. It was clarity, courage, and self-assertion. It had set in motion a chain of events that led me to discover my worth, claim my voice, and live authentically. I had survived manipulation, favoritism, and emotional control. And in doing so, I had discovered the true meaning of resilience, freedom, and self-respect. My life was now my own. I wrote my own rules. I made my own choices. I lived my own story. And as I stood at the threshold of every new opportunity, whispering all right to myself, it was no longer a word of compliance, but a mantra of empowerment, a declaration of freedom, and a testament to the strength that comes from finally taking control of your life. I was thriving, unshakable, and at peace. I had turned every hardship into strength, every tear into wisdom, every moment of patience into power, and at last I was finally free.